podcast. I'm your host, Evelyn Lamb. In each episode, we invite a Hispanic or Latinx mathematician to share their journey in mathematics. Today, I'm very happy to be talking with Juan Meza. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here, Evelyn. It's a real pleasure.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Let's see. What can I tell you? I'm a computational mathematician. I've worked in industry, national labs, academia, and now I'm working for the National Science Foundation. And it's been quite an interesting ride so far.
And so you just started at the NSF, right?
I started at NSF last year. It's been about 14 months now.
Okay. And what is your role there?
My position here is Division Director for the Division of Mathematical Sciences. Our main goal is to support fundamental mathematics research and education in the country. This past year, we had a budget of about $235 million, 3/4 of which goes directly to researchers across the country. In total, we support almost 5,000 faculty, postdocs, and graduate students.
And so it's been, I'm sure, quite a journey to get to that point. What were some of your early experiences in math?
Oh, that's a great question. So early experiences, I'm not sure that they are so much in math as they are sort of in science in general. I was always very curious as a kid and spent a lot of time reading a lot of science fiction and a lot of science type related books. And at some point, I just got interested in math, probably just through puzzles. I love to do puzzles, and a lot of the puzzles, as you probably know, have a lot of math content in them, or they involve some sort of a math trick that you need to learn about. And I think that's just sort of my way to get into the mathematics.
Mm-hmm. So you were drawn in by like Martin Gardner puzzles and that kind of thing?
Yeah, Martin Gardner, Scientific American, used to be one of the best reads I had as a kid.
And so as you continued in school, how did you end up going into mathematics as an educational and career path?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It wasn't something that I picked early on. I liked math, and I liked it because it helped me solve a lot of problems. But I was set to go into engineering, and in particular electrical engineering. And then I got a very lucky break, and I ended up doing an internship at NASA right out of high school. And then all of a sudden, I got interested in sort of, at that time it was the shuttle. It was just starting to get off, and this whole question of the Apollo missions, and because I grew up in Houston, that was sort of the big thing. And they got me very interested in computer science. And so then I sort of slid into computer science as one of the things I wanted to do. So it wasn't until graduate school that I really became interested in mathematics as a field in its own. It was mostly just something that I used to be able to do other things. Growing
up in the shadow of NASA in Houston probably kind of helped you find that internship.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a kind of a lucky break. It was one of those things that you never know is going to happen. But our high school counselor had just said, "Oh, there's some opportunities for internships. If you're interested, fill out an application and send it in." And I just happened to get one of the few students there that got chosen for an internship. It was really, really quite an experience, I'll have to say.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like that counselor really helped you pursue your interests, but did you have other people, mentors or teachers who encouraged or discouraged you in pursuing engineering and math?
I had a couple of people that encouraged me a lot. There was my calculus teacher, or rather I should say my pre-calculus teacher. We didn't have a calculus course in high school. But he was very, very encouraging in terms of helping me think about math as a field of its own. And then I had other people, mostly at Rice University, where I was at as an undergraduate. And Richard Tapia was the name of one of the professors, who's probably very familiar to this audience
yes.
as a great mentor. And of course, you went to Rice University, so you probably know of Richard as well, and you know what a great mentor he can be. And so he inspired me to do other things as well. So early on, I had a lot of people that sort of gave me that motivation and inspiration to go into these fields.
And so you went to Rice for undergraduate. Did you also go for your graduate work?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time at Rice. It's one of these things. If as a Rice alum yourself, it's sort of sometimes you sort of are a little embarrassed about how much time we've spent at Rice. But I did a bachelor's, and then I did a what they call the fifth year as a professional master's in electrical engineering. Then I went out and worked for a couple of years in a computer company and at Exxon. And then I decided to go back to graduate school, where I then got a master's and a PhD in mathematical sciences, as it was called at the time.
What are some of the research questions that motivate you?
Well, I try to keep my foot in the research arena just because I think it's important for anybody at any position to have a little bit of research. But one of the areas that I'm looking at these days is a field called derivative-free optimization. So to explain that, I'm really a computational mathematician, which means I like to take problems and try to solve them on a computer. And the way to solve them on a computer is to develop mathematical models that you can put on a computer and then solve them using that computational power. And within that particular area, there's a field called optimization. And optimization is where you try to find the best solution of something, or the what's called the minimal or the maximum of a particular function. A good example is a problem that I worked in a little while ago, which is called the protein folding problem. And in that problem, what you look at is you look at a protein, which, we have, thousands of these in our bodies, and they perform all sorts of functions. But the question then becomes is what actual structure, what kind of shape does a protein take? Because if it does its job correctly, it's in the right shape. But if it doesn't fold in the right shape, then bad things happen to us. So biologists are very interested in understanding what's the right shape. Well, it turns out that if you take that protein and you model it mathematically, and then you ask the question, what's the lowest energy state? So what's the minimum energy of that protein? That corresponds to supposedly the structure that it occurs in nature. So that's a way to translate what's happening in nature or inside our bodies into a mathematical formalism. And what we try to do is try to develop algorithms and methods that help us find those minima, because then that helps us understand the biology of proteins.
And when you say derivative free, when you talk about optimization, of course, my first thought is find where the derivative is zero. For some quantity, is this meaning like this is a non-calculus kind of way to do this optimization?
Excellent observation. And yes, exactly. We've all been taught that, in fact, the best way, or the way of finding a minimum is take the derivative, set it equal to zero, and then that's where your minimum is. Well, in a lot of situations, it's very difficult to find the derivative. And one of the things that I was becoming very interested in when I was working at the national labs was these optimization problems where the function evaluation, rather than, x squared plus 3x plus 2 or something like that, really the way to calculate the function is through a computer simulation. And so somebody's written a computer simulation, you run it for however many hours or sometimes days, and that's your function evaluation. Well, when you have that situation, derivatives are very hard to compute, or they're non-existent. So the question then becomes, how can I do the same thing without having to use derivatives?
Mm-hmm. It's like with one hand tied behind my back or something.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Good. Yes, that's exactly a good analogy. Yeah.
Did you kind of start your career working on this type of problem, or have you done a lot of different problems in applied and computational math over your career?
Worked on a lot of different problems. So I've worked in linear algebra, optimization, of course, but I've also worked in PDEs, partial differential equations. It's kind of funny. I don't know that if I had charted out my career path that I would have picked exactly this, but it just seemed to happen.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about the importance of mentorship in your career? Both when you were younger, you talk about Richard Tapia. I'm sure you had some other mentors, but now, of course, you probably are more in the role of mentor to other people. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. When I think about sort of my career, I've always been very fortunate to have mentors at just critical points in time. But I was thinking about this a little while ago, and it turns out that I've actually had a lot of mentors throughout my career. It's just some of them have been more important than sometimes, and some of them had a greater effect. But I think role models and mentors are probably one of the single most important aspects of anybody's career and success. There's this myth of sort of this, the person who does everything on their own and they're just sort of a self-made man or self-made woman. But the reality is we've all had help along the way. And I've been very fortunate. So Richard Tapia is one, Ingram Olkin. He's a statistician actually, but he was very instrumental in helping me out when I first got out with my PhD. Margaret Wright, another mathematician. She and I talked a lot. At certain points in my time when I needed career advice, she was very instrumental as well. So these people are just so important in our lives. And, when you get so lucky as I have, I like to turn around and then turn it and, like I say, pay it forward. I like to do the same thing for other folks.
What kinds of mentoring work have you done?
Well, throughout my career, I've either had graduate students or postdocs, depending on where I was at. And I've also volunteered to be mentors for various types of programs. There was a program called MentorNet a while ago, so I was involved with that. And whenever I've been either at the national labs or in industry or even here at the National Science Foundation, if there's a mentor program, I usually sign up for it. So in fact, just last month, I entered the mentor program here, and I've got 2 mentees that I'm working with right now, as well as being mentored by somebody else here.
And have you deliberately done a lot of mentorship with people from underrepresented groups?
I try to do that, yeah. So I am a member of SOCNUS. I was on the board for a long time, and I use that organization as a way of also trying to develop more mentoring relationships. I think a lot of times just doing our job and doing it in a way that allows us to be visible is just another way of being a mentor. I found that just, for example, I get invited to give a lot of talks. And so when I go to the universities, I always say, okay, I will do this, but I only have one requirement. And the requirement usually is I want to have lunch with the graduate students by themselves, or I want to have lunch with the undergraduates, depending on the institution. And so that's usually, my fee, if you will, when they ask me to talk.
And of course, no career is completely smooth sailing. So can you talk a little bit about some challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome those?
Sure. It's funny that you phrase that so politely and nicely, but you are absolutely right. There has probably been as many failures as I've had successes. And I used to give a talk to students. Again, it's one of these talks where I get invited, and it was I think it was titled "Why I Want You to Fail." And I used to get shocks from the students because they were expecting a here's how to be successful kind of thing. But my point to them was that if you're always succeeding, you're probably not pushing yourself to the ultimate. You're not trying hard enough to really expand your capabilities. And so to a certain extent, not only do we have to allow ourselves to fail, but we have to allow ourselves to really spectacularly fail sometimes. And there have been times when I can say that that's been true. I've applied for jobs and I have done not a very good job in the interview, or I have tried to work on a project and it just didn't work. Even after, we've poured a lot of money into it, it just didn't work out. But what you do is you take those problems and you go back and you try to figure out what can you learn from something like that. And the point that I try to make is that sometimes we learn a lot more from the failures than we do from the successes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just this morning when for me morning, for you afternoon, when we were trying to set up our recording, we learned from several failures. And I now have some things that I will be doing in the future to hopefully make it work better.
Yes, yes. Well, but just to add on to that, what I find in a lot of our groups, you're talking about underrepresented minorities and women in the STEM fields. I think sometimes we're very reluctant to take those chances because if we fail, somehow or another, we feel like we're more visible or that people are just kind of watching us more, or they're scrutinizing us more than perhaps other people. And so I think that leads a lot of us to really try hard to not fail. And what I try to point out is that no, in fact, if you really want to be successful, you've got to be able to handle those situations as well.
But it can be a lot harder if you feel like your failure represents an entire group of people who are not treated as equals sometimes.
Absolutely. And if I were to say, probably the first 15 or 20 years of my career, I felt exactly like that. And it was only after a while that I started to feel a little bit more comfortable. It never completely goes away, by the way.
Yeah, I guess that's either good or bad to hear. I'm not sure which.
Well, it's normal. And so, you get better at it, but the point is that you will always feel like that, but that's a normal thing.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the Lathisms project kind of grew out of a Hispanic Heritage Month observance where this group of people wanted to help make Hispanic and Latinx mathematicians more visible during Hispanic Heritage Month. So have you been involved in Hispanic Heritage Month things before? And what are your thoughts on that observance or celebration?
So I have been involved before. It's usually, typically, I'll get requests to give talks at around that time of the year.
Uh-huh.
So my thought is this. I think it's important for all of us to really recognize and celebrate the successes of the people that are out there. There are a huge number of people that are trying very hard to do things and to improve other people's lives. And if we don't stop and recognize that, I think we're not doing our community a service. So I think it's so important to really reach out and to really highlight those activities because it's something that we all do kind of over and above all the other things that we have to do in our lives and our careers. So to have people do these things and still, be both technically successful and then also really incredibly successful as people themselves, I think is so powerful a statement to everybody out there. We sometimes have this sense that to be successful, you have to have a bunch of awards and you have to have a whole bunch of different papers or something like that. But for me, the people that I really emulate, those people that I mentioned, Richard Tapia, Ingram Molken, Margaret Wright, the reason I emulate them is not because they're great mathematicians and statisticians. They are. They very definitely are. But they're also wonderful people and they have done a lot to help other people. And to me, that's something that we need to really celebrate is that balance and that willingness to go beyond ourselves and to help other people.
I guess to close, do you have any advice that you give, especially for Hispanic and Latinx students who might be listening to this podcast and might be interested in a math or science career?
My advice would be a little bit similar to what I said a little while ago. Try as hard as you can. You really are going to face a lot of obstacles. But I take inspiration from something my mother taught me a long time ago. And this was actually when I was probably in elementary school and I was getting frustrated with some problems, some homework problems or something. And what she pointed out to me was that success was a lot more about hard work and perseverance than how smart you think you are or how smart other people think you are. So for me, a lot of times we've got to try and we're going to fail. But that's okay, because if you try hard enough and if you persevere, you will succeed.
That is a wonderful thing to end on. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
Thank you for listening to the Lathisms podcast. It's produced by me, Evelyn Lamb, and made possible by a Tensor Summa grant from the Mathematical Association of America. Our music is Volvere by La Floresta. Lathisms is an initiative to celebrate the accomplishments of Hispanic and Latinx mathematicians. It was founded in 2016 by Alexander Diaz-Lopez, Pamela Harris, Alicia Prieto Langarica, and Gabriel Sosa. You can find more information about the project at lathisms.org. That's LATHISMS.org. Join us next time to hear from another inspiring mathematician.